Good evening, everybody. My name is Leon, and I'm joined by...
Everybody, my name is Leanne.
And we are going to spend the next hour with you talking about attention and focus. Leanne is going to introduce our team from the USA that are joining us this evening. But just before we do that, we just want to set some basic ground rules. Please, if we could mute all microphones, if we could switch off all cameras, please use the chat box. It's lovely to see everybody that has responded up to now. And this is going to be an exceptional evening with our two guests. So let's make this a fun-filled evening, but also keep on bringing those questions. We might not answer all of them tonight, but we will within the next week. Leanne, will you introduce our guests?
Absolutely. Then please just note that we are recording. We've had a couple of requests from people who's not able to join us tonight. And that's why we're asking that you please keep your cameras off. But enjoy. I mean, whenever would you again have an opportunity to have two such special people talk to us about a passion that they have and that they're spending their lives on understanding and helping us make it better. So keep the questions coming. We will definitely do our best to get to all those, like Leon said, maybe not tonight, but we will make a commitment to give you answers. I would like to say that I'm so nervous to talk to you, Dr. Leanne and Jeff. I'm so scared that the time we have with you is just going to fly by and we've got a million questions for you. I'd like to introduce Dr. Leanne Chukoskie. Am I saying that right, Leanne?
Yes, wonderful.
She's got such an amazing background. I've actually printed it out because even with memory training, this is not good enough to remember all your credentials. So Leanne is co-director of the Research on Autism and Development Lab at the University of California in San Diego. She's an assistant research scientist in the Institute for Neural Computation. She's assistant science director of the Temporal Dynamics of Learning Center and the director of the Power of Neurogaming Center at the Qualcomm, am I saying that right? Qualcomm Institute at UC San Diego. Leanne, it seems you really, really never stop learning. That's amazing.
But equally important.
Oh, yes. Equally important. Jeff Coleman. Jeff has an amazing background. Jeff's one of those miracle workers who can take an idea, put it into a viable business, and then grow that business. He's just wonderful with doing that. So Jeff is the CEO and co-founder of BrainLeap Technologies, a company that's got the most amazing vision. And we'll talk about that vision later on. I've actually printed it out because I love your vision. But Jeff is also a graduate from the Wharton School of Business, and he's worked with many small and growing businesses over the past 20 years. And our luck is that he's now passionate about growing a business that works with attention span and focus. How many lives can we change just with that? So we're excited to talk to you. Welcome and thank you. We know you've got very busy schedules. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Glad to be here.
Yes, happy to be here.
So Dr. Leanne is going to leave us earlier. She had a prior commitment. So all our first questions are going to be posed to you. And then, Jeff, you're going to fill the second half of the evening. So I'd like to start by reading something that we found on the BrainLeap website. And it says, intuitively, parents and teachers understand that attention is important to learning. If you cannot pay attention in class or while reading a book, you are not going to learn much. However, attention is much more than that foundational skill than just paying attention. Attention skills impact self-control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's leading up to that executive function skill. So Dr. Leanne, I'm going to start with my first three questions together with Leanne. But I think we so often hear that parents or teachers refer to children being zoning out, daydreaming, or just not listening or paying attention. And it's important that we'd like to know from you. We know there are three terms that specifically refer to these. And Leanne, do you want to ask that question and see if we could get clarity on that?
Absolutely, because I think especially as a parent or teacher, I think it's important to understand these three terms, because if you do your research and you're desperately online looking for help for a child that you're either teaching to or that is your own that you need to help, you find these terms. And the first is, I don't understand the difference between attention, focus, and gaze. Are they the same thing? Why are they important? Are they different things? So please help us with that.
Sure, absolutely. So they are related, but attention is the broad catch-all term. It is foundational to a lot of other cognitive skills you mentioned, executive function skills. It's a really broad construct that includes aspects of focus, aspects of shifting, selecting an item to attend to. It's important to think of attention as a limited resource. It's a capacity, right? And as we'll talk about later, it can be trained. And it's tied to things that you do. You use attention when you move. You use attention to maintain your posture, right? So that's where this limited capacity comes into play. Focus is a component of this broader construct of attention. And we think about focus often in terms of like an analogy of a spotlight, you know, really sort of narrowing all of those resources to a point. We often think of it in visual terms, what we're looking at, but you can also think of it in terms of what we're listening to. You're focusing on a certain set of sounds. And sometimes people use focus also for being like in the zone. You know, I am focused and I am therefore excluding all the other things that I could select, could be attending to. Now, the last component you asked about is gaze. So gaze is basically where we're looking, and our eyes as primates have a specialization in them. So all primates all higher primates have a foveal specialization, a part of their eye which allows us to see in very, very high resolution. And for those reasons, it's useful for us to aim that to areas that we want to scrutinize. So the brain has developed alongside of this specialization, and our attention systems are very tightly linked to where we're looking for these reasons, because that retinal specialization in the back of your eye allows you to really scrutinize the thing. And because we can aim those, our attention, our focus tends to go with our gaze. However, you can separate them, and that's something that's actually, it's not uncommon, but people don't think of it this way. We can covertly attend to something. So I might be looking at you, but paying attention to the fact that my dog is scratching at the door to the office, and I would rather she not come in, right? So a piece of my attention has moved, like my mind's eye has moved over there, even though I am looking at you. So that's how I like to think about attention as the broad construct, focus as a piece of that, and gaze as the thing that tends to go with focus, but is not obligatory to go with focus.
Okay.
So Dr. Leanne, you mentioned shifting, but I don't know if it's a construct well understood within the sense that it affects how we pay attention. Could we talk a little bit more about shifting and the net effect shifting has on our attention?
Sure. So you can think about shifting very simply. Like if I am looking at my cluttered desk, you know, I'm going to shift my attention from one thing to another. I'm selecting different objects, but most often, and that's fairly simple. So you basically, but I'll use that example because the processes are the same in each case. I have to select an object, focus on it, and then when I'm preparing to shift, I have to select another object that I'm preparing to attend to. I disengage from the first one and engage the second, right? So there are a number of things going on. When you're talking about shifting tasks in school, you still need to do those same things. And I think that one thing that's often missed is that that disengagement part actually can be better supported by like really wrapping things up, you know, sort of closure, and that allows for a better shift, right?
Exactly. And something I just thought about that I wanted to ask you is, what is the net effect of that then on reading ability? Because
what is the effect? I'm sorry.
On a child's reading ability.
Yeah. So if you're not attending effectively, then you don't necessarily have that capacity to read a lot, right? You know, you're sort of drifting off. Oftentimes, again, depending on the nature of the attention challenge a child has, they might lose their place in a page of text, which is frustrating and doesn't necessarily contribute to wanting to engage for a long period of time in that depth. So yes, you know, these things tend to go together. In fact, that there's a large literature on dyslexia that posits that attention is the core deficit. There are a lot of other theories, and almost certainly dyslexia is many different things, not a unitary phenomenon, but attention is certainly a piece.
The attention, literally, from what you're saying, and I think from what we understand and what you read, affects absolutely every single area of school, work, life. And I think that's why we're here tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, it sounds very grand when you say it like that, but it's important. I mean, even for sport, right? You know, it's very clear, like you need to have excellent attention to be aware of, if you're playing football, right? You need to be aware of where your teammates are, but you also need to have the capacity to be managing the ball at your feet, for example, right? You know, so yes, it's really involved in lots of things. It's I think a foundational cognitive skill on which many others build.
A question that I have, can this be trained? So you've done lots of research that focuses on these elements. Can this be trained? Is it something that we are born with? Is it something that if it's a deficit, it stays a deficit? Or can we make it better?
Absolutely. You know, so this is the thing that I started doing research on this about 12 years ago with my colleague Jean Townsend, and she had been studying children on the autism spectrum who had a specific deficit in attention orienting, meaning like the shifting of attention spatially. And we both agreed that we wanted to stop measuring things and actually start trying to intervene, see if we can make a change. And my background was in eye movements, and I said, well, these, you know, the system goes with attention, goes with spatial attention, and so maybe we can use gaze to harness the attention system. So what we did was design a suite of video games that you play with your eyes. So they are games that require you to look at certain things, require you to inhibit a look to certain things. And by virtue of practicing that in a fun way, we were able to demonstrate that, yes, indeed, you can train attention. Now this is my research, but it's not alone. Like a lot of people train a different aspect of attention through things like martial arts, you know, meditation, you know, but for some children, those things are harder to access, right? You know, you kind of have to get into a point where you know what it means to focus, you know what it feels like to focus, to inhibit a look, to resist distraction. And then some more of these things are accessible to you, but they're absolutely trainable. Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask a question to Jeff. I know I'm being naughty now, but Jeff, on your website, you talk about training someone with weak leg muscles to kick a soccer ball harder. And it says that if you can teach that player to kick and kick and kick, but if you don't invest in the legs and making those strong, then kicking that ball is not going to help. And could you tie that in with attention and what we've just learned from Dr. Leanne, why that is so important?
Yeah, so you know, you actually will improve if you just keep kicking the ball, but you're not going to see the improvement that you could have from strength training. And so the games that Leanne is talking about are kind of a strength training for your attention. They're building those skills at a very foundational level, much like the muscles in your legs. You know, you strengthen them a little by using them, but if you actually focus the effort on actually building the muscle with weights and specific exercises designed for it, you're going to have much stronger legs that then will allow you to kick the ball much further. And the same thing with attention. When you build those muscles, you are increasing your capacity to kick harder. You still have to have the right skills, but you have that capacity there. And that's what makes a world of difference for kids who have the weak attention muscles, for lack of a better term.
And it's a gradual build up, isn't it? It takes perseverance and time, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes, playing the games is much like exercise. You got to do it regularly. You want to do it multiple times per week for you know, 20 to 30 minutes per session, so that you are building that. It actually playing the games actually makes your eyes tired, particularly when you first start, because you're learning to. Leanne didn't mention it, but you actually move your eyes 3 to 4 times per second naturally, and when you are practicing that focus, it's actually tiring to hold your focus on something that you're not naturally going to do, because if you start noticing these things, you'll notice your eyes are moving all the time around, even when you're doing something, and practicing that focus is a workout.
It's tiring because attention is a limited capacity, but it's a capacity that you can build. Okay.
Yes, yes. So, Dr. Leanne, the next question from me is your research started with autism, and autism kids in specific, but later on you carried that through into mainstream schools and children. Don't you want to just start with the reason for your focus on autism and what your findings have been and how that could be carried out in mainstream schools?
I think we'd love to know, because I think as a parent, we often don't realize that there could be a problem with focus or attention, purely because there's no formal diagnosis or no formal condition. And I think that's a very nice question. Please help us there and help us understand.
Sure. So so based on the work of my colleague and related work, we were finding that about 80% of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders had this kind of orienting challenge. That meant that they were slow and inaccurate in shifting their gaze, eye and head, to a new target, but also slow with that covert shift of attention that you can measure in the lab, but has these effects. So I would say that, you know, this is still at the hypothesis stage, but we engaged these games, this training, this hypothesis, because we think that by training attention in kids with orienting challenges, you could actually get to better social processing if you do it young, because the social dynamics are super fast in your world. And if you're missing things, as Jeff said, we make eye movements 3 times a second. If you're missing that eyebrow raise that mom made, you miss the fact that she's a little annoyed with you, and you might want to be a little wary with your next steps. So this is how we got started here. But you know, anyone who's familiar with children who, you know, are struggling maybe with developmental disorders or other challenges, it's not a cut and dried diagnosis, right? Children, you know, might be diagnosed in the autism spectrum or not. They might also get an additional diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder or ADHD, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And these things often go together. A large number of the children that we worked with were co-diagnosed with autism and ADHD. ADHD tends to be more related to the ability or lack of ability to focus, and not so much about that orienting, right? So we began to realize that this method of training using gaze as a harness to train attention had a lot more purchase to it. You could really help children learn how to focus, learn how to inhibit. And then once we got to that point, we realized, well, you know, there's a lot of kids who just need, they're struggling and they have a challenge for whatever reason in their life. They don't necessarily need a diagnosis, but they're struggling with attention. Maybe it's inhibiting their progress reading, that just simply engaging these games can allow them to learn what does it mean to really focus, to practice exercising that muscle that they can then take to other arenas of their life. And that's kind of how that progression happened, and why we really want to see this in mainstream schools, because there are so many children who struggle needlessly, and it's not always the case. In fact, in many cases, it's not that they need a pill. They need to learn how to manage their own attention.
They just need a bit of a push, don't they?
Yes.
Just a bit of help.
I've just been looking at the chat box, and I know that we running slightly into our time. But Dr. Leanne, I think this is a very apt question where we're at right now. So this individual says, when you speak about focus, so they just move a little bit on, it appears that parents do not really understand this. I teach younger children, and parents often say their children can focus as they stay focused on their iPad for long periods of time. Without lights and sound, etc., I find children can't focus. How can we help parents see the difference? Oh, there's the family has joined.
Oh, cute.
Yes. Back to that dog who I mentioned. My comfort attention.
We all love dogs.
So we live in, I like to call it the attention economy. You know, we live in a buzzing world where there are so many bids for our attention at any given time. And children these days are really at the forefront of that, you know, with all these digital devices, and they're built really to keep your attention, right? So it's not surprising that a child can be super focused on a very well-designed iPad app, because it's designed to keep the child there, right? It's designed to keep them from going away, right? Games are particularly good at this. The question is, you know, is this doing anything good for the child? And chances are no, unless it was designed specifically to help the child build attentional skills. It's not necessarily for that. So why can a child focus on this versus not focus in school? Because the child hasn't, this is an artificial situation where you almost, I want to think of it as the child's focus is trapped by the device. They have not developed a focus skill. It's the device that is driving that, right? So children need to actually develop their focus skills so they can deploy them in whatever environment they find themselves in. Does that
almost like having a thrall versus having more abstract work where you do a lot of cognitive processing when it's schoolwork, for instance. Hey.
Yes.
I've got one question. I'm dying. I can't wait any second longer. I have to ask this. Dr. Leanne, as a mom, I'm so glad we're at this point where I can ask you this question. Is there anything that we as parents can do at home, or even if we teach at school, but specifically at home? And now with lockdowns all over the world, lots of parents helping their children homeschooling or helping with homework at school, or you might be somebody who oversees schoolwork. Is there anything, little simple things that we can do that can help with that process of getting them to concentrate and focus a bit better?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think there absolutely is, and we just need to think about our children's attention a little differently, right? We really need to think about it in terms of building skills. So, you know, just like you would reward a child for, you know, cleaning up, you know, putting their dishes away after dinner, you actually want to notice when they are self-focused in something that's probably not a digital device. They're focused on a puzzle. They've spent 10 minutes reading independently, and you want to encourage that. You want to encourage that deep work. You want to discourage them from being distracted, like doing 5 things at once. You know, I have teenage boys who swear to me that they can listen to music, do their math, watch a video. It's like,
they sound pretty normal, don't they? Typical teenagers.
This is absolutely not true. I know, I can, you know, but it's, you know, you really want to discourage that kind of diffusion of their attention and really encourage that, you know, focus on one thing at a time, and you know, note when they're doing better too. Hey, I've noticed that you spent more time today doing this thing and you look like you were really deeply focused. How did that feel? Talk about it. You know, have they ever experienced a moment where they were like really in the flow? It might be a sport, it might be a puzzle, it might be, you know, it depends on your child, but you really want to talk about it, encourage that, so that they can make more building.
What I would like to ask, Dr. Leanne, often you hear parents say to a child, you need to concentrate, you need to focus.
Hello?
And kids don't necessarily, like you would know what we mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a better way of explaining to our kids how we want them to focus or concentrate, what we expect of them? What would your advice as a mom and as a professional be?
Yeah, so words like focus and concentrate often tend to be lost on a kid who's never experienced it, right? If you haven't had those moments of really being deep into something, then it's hard to tell a kid what that's like. And that's why it's really useful if you can mark it. When you see your kid, you know, really immersed in a puzzle or Lego play, right? And like searching for that next piece, and say, you look really focused now. You are really concentrated now, right? Like tell them that that's what it is so that they can build it. You know, sometimes it's hard to observe those things. This is exactly what our games are built to do, right? So that we're creating a situation where they can focus, and then we actually through the game have them practice that and deepen that, and then they can feel what that's like. Yeah.
So how long does it take to be trained to improve focus? So, and by how much can focus really improve? Or is this too a general question?
Yeah, so, you know, I think we haven't yet explored the boundaries of this space, but, you know, we've seen good results inside of 4 weeks, but I think that, you know, this is ongoing research. The transfer to other skills comes a little bit later. You might see improvement in the game and on some measures that we use for evaluating attention skill, but you might not see, you know, things like affecting a child's ability to stick to their math homework or read longer or what have you for another couple weeks. And again, you know, Jeff used the analogy of exercise, and that's what this is, right? You might actually have stronger leg muscles by strength training, but it doesn't translate into your, you know, 40-meter dash speed until you get that extra practice, right? Of taking these newly strong muscles and actually trying to get faster, right? So they're linked. Yeah.
It's also like drilling that process into the brain.
Yes.
It becomes stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
Is there an age limit to this? So we spoke about it earlier, that it's at a younger age is better to start engaging so that there's that experience of focus and that could be carried through. But is there an age limit?
As far as I can tell, no. We've actually done our first trial with kids on the autism spectrum they're not just kids. We worked up to 25-year-olds. And we saw really good results. And now we're using different principles that are more focused on speed of processing and distractibility for older adults, right? So older adults, there's this cognitive decline that sadly we all experience even as part of healthy aging. But then of course, people are worried about the non-healthy aging part, right? The actual dementia. And so we're trying, and this is active research, to inhibit that slide, right? How can we, and we see great results, right? How can we help these older adults be broader in their span of looking behavior when they're driving, inhibit distractions, be more focused, and it works in older adults too. I wanted to tie this back to something you said, what are the limits? One of the things that I'm really interested in pursuing next, I'm very focused in my research on developmental concerns, and then of course the end of life of that, and improving performance. But the other side of that is super performance. Athletes, fighter pilots. I mean, these people have exquisite attention that has been trained in certain circumstances. So how might we actually help people who have, normal attention capacities, but really kick it into high gear, really get into that super performance realm, because that is absolutely possible. Yeah.
Right. We've started right at the bottom, and that's where we'd like to focus. Dr. Leanne, a question has come up, and I think if we have time, we just want to quickly do that linkage again. The individual says they're a teacher at a school, and they have recently had a discussion with regards to the correlation between focus and gaze. She says, but no one still understands the gaze feature, and it asked if you could maybe just spend 1 minute again and just explaining that the correlation between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you could be focused sort of with your mind's eye on something, but where you choose to look is typically where your attention is focused, right? They go together because the neural pathways in our brain are designed to move our eyes, to select new things. We actually even tend to look at things that we're listening to. So these things really go together. And so that's why we've chosen to use gaze as a harness for training focus, as well as other aspects of the broad construct of attention. But they can be separated, and we do that. When we designed our games, we initially want to train, look to the thing that popped up. It's only available for a little bit. Look at the thing, look at the thing, look at the thing. Fast shifts of attention over a broad area. And then the next thing we do is look at a thing, and there's going to be a little warning, but don't look at this next thing. In order to do that, okay, I'm just going to break it down attention-wise. In order to do that, you need to be aware that there is a thing that is about to pop up. Your mind's eye covertly moves to that thing, but you do not move your gaze. You do not look at it. If you look at it, you lose points in the game, right? So
that inhibitory control. Oh my goodness.
I think
yeah, it's a lot of control, but it's great control for children to learn. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's a great question that I think we could attend to. We could also say if a child does horse riding and say really enjoys it, and they're able to focus and build that attention, could that eventually carry through to schoolwork and having better attention at schoolwork?
As long as the scaffolding is there, as long as you basically take that, you try to get the children to, recognize that the attention that they bring to that sort of horseback riding scenario is the same. I think it's a little harder to translate because you're not really tapping into this gaze behavior. Or maybe it is. I mean, so if the child is really like engaging horseback riding at a high level, so that they are really looking ahead and they're planning their route, you know, and they're really thinking about potential obstacles in their way, then that should absolutely transfer to a school environment, because that's the kind of thing we're trying to mimic in our games, right? They have to be very alert, very focused on their task. They have to be scanning their environment, looking for challenges, looking for where they want to go, planning, all of that. Yes, absolutely should transfer.
In general, then, if I understand you correctly, that type of activity would then be preferable if you do have a child that struggles with attention focus. So anything where you really engage, you need to plan, you need to use as many of your senses and cognitive abilities as possible in that moment. In other words, they should almost be tired afterwards, shouldn't they? Because it should be hard work. Am I correct? Should be hard work doing that exercise, although they love and enjoy it, but it needs to be a workout in disguise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, so bicycling, like fast, you know, if in a safe environment, obviously, but like really looking ahead at where you're going to go, and, you know, so like mountain biking type of thing, that's another, you know, some of the children who have attention challenges also have motor coordination challenges. So things like skateboarding is not really an option safely, but the same things, right? So anytime you're moving fast and having to make quick decisions, integrating over a broad area, are going to tap into some of those same things.
So training attention and focus, can that be done in a group, or is it an individual function? So does that training happen one-on-one or in a group? So
there's a lot of people who are talking about executive function in groups, and there are some types of school environments. Adele Diamond has written a lot about this, but also Charles Hillman has written a lot about this with a Fit Kids study, and both of them are tapping into different components. I think that, you know, you can engage, so aerobic activity is just generally speaking very good for the brain. It washes the brain a lot of neurochemicals that are good for cognitive skills, and people don't tend to think of it that way, but they are. In a group setting, something like martial arts practice can be, because that requires just a lot of focus, a lot of really precision of movement, and it also involves some aerobic activity. That's very good. There are some curricula. Adele Diamond created Tools of the Mind. Some Montessori curricula have been suggested to be good for executive function, but they're talking about it sort of like up a level than what we're talking about. We're talking about those attention skills, and if those are not there, it's harder to get to the executive.
So you cannot skip the building blocks.
That's how I see it, yes.
All right. We promise this is your last question. We know you have to run.
So
the question is, in school environments, would it be beneficial to have built-in brain breaks in lessons to help kids just disengage and re-engage into the next session?
I think that's actually a great idea. I am a massive fan of recess, but I think that one thing that we don't tend to do in schools as well as we could is the sort of reflection and wrap up. Remember, I talked about the disengage to re-engage. So you can really help a child with that shift if you really spend some time in that wrap up. We're going to reflect. We're going to close this down, and then we pull away, and then yes, absolutely give them time to run. I had a very attention challenged my youngest child when he was young, and in school he would regularly get in trouble in class, and his teacher's response was to take away recess. You know, and I'd bring paper after paper after paper. I was like, you know, you can take away his choice at recess, but you are shooting both of you in the foot by stopping him from running. Like, let him go. Like, make him do an obstacle course or something. And I promise you, you will have a more attentive child in the afternoon. So yes, brain breaks are definitely good, but it's good to let them run.
So you were going to give us one exercise that parents could do at home that could improve attention and focus.
Oh, no, that would be so much appreciated.
Just before you
So you run.
Ah.
I think it's not walk or go anymore. It's now run.
I actually think that, I mean, this is going to sound kind of hokey, but like there's some really great like kid like yoga type of exercises or any kind of and it doesn't have to be like super you know, static or, you know, hold that posture for a long time, lots of breathing, but just being able to get a child in a situation where they have to think about their body in a particular position and hold it there for a little bit of time is starting that process of trying to, there's going to be a little discomfort, you know, you could make it fun. You're both trying to do it together, but those kinds of things will help build capacity for kids to start building this attention.
I
But
can
yes,
maybe share with parents what very similar to what you just discussed. What we do is lie on the floor, and for 30 seconds, nothing is allowed to move. And as soon as you as a parent see anything move, you shout out, hand, foot, head. Would something like that maybe help? Just those small little focus exercises.
I would try to reward more than like, you know, so yes, I mean, that could be a skill. But it's also like, you know, you want to complement the don't move with the move in this very specific way, right? Yeah. So sometimes kids are better at the move part than the don't move part, right? Yeah. So you want to give them both so that you can, you know the phrase catch 'em being good. It's the same thing here, right? You want to reward what's working and what's good and keep that going.
That's a good way of doing it.
Dr. Leanne, thank you so much from us. We know that you have to run. This is the first. We hope we're going to have another opportunity to chat to you, and we've started right at the bottom, so we're going to expand this. But thank you very much.
While we have witnesses, we want you to promise to please join us again.
Absolutely, I'd love to. But I'll leave you with my better half right now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff, move into the spotlight. There we are.
Thank you.
So this is what we've been waiting for to talk about this evening, and that is, or this morning, but this is the company and the tool that you represent. So we've now got a basic understanding of where we come from. So Delena is going to share your vision that we also got off your website. And then we'd like to know more about these activities and what you do and where you engage and what value has been added.
I love this. And I think it speaks to me as a parent, because we are concerned if you don't see your child concentrating and focusing, you know what's going to happen. You know the problems they're going to have. And we just want to make the road they travel so much easier for them.
Yes.
And when I look at your vision, Jeff, it's so beautiful, and it really speaks to me. It says, our goal is to translate research findings into effective, affordable, and readily available tools. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. Taking the credibility of the research and that amazing data you've got, but now making it a tool that will actually help kids. And I think somewhere else I read that you want to change, is it like 1 million kids a year?
That is our goal, to improve the attention skills of 1 million children a year. But to do that, we need to start with, real building blocks, not just a good idea, but something that has evidence behind it. Because far too often, parents and schools try things that sound logical, but if there's no data behind it to show that it really works, like keeping a kid in from recess as punishment, you're creating a problem that's even worse than what you started with. And if you're actually working with real, with credible evidence-based outcomes, now you can be confident that if you do something, you're going to get the outcome your goal, towards your goal, and rather than, creating a worse problem than you might have had to begin with. So that's really why we care about evidence. As Leanne mentioned, we are married. It's been 27 years. living with a scientist that long really makes you much more focused on evidence than I would have ever been otherwise. But yeah, it's really important to have that evidence that you know what you're trying to do is backed by that you're going to get the outcome because it's worked across multiple, in this case, children. But you know, to use that evidence to move forward.
I think you had the added benefits, which couldn't have been easy at the time, but having a child of your own that struggled with attention span,
Absolutely,
just give you a different perspective.
Yeah, so this research started in part because Leanne's nephew, her brother's son, was diagnosed with autism. But we also have our youngest has definitely struggled with attention, never diagnosed with anything, but certainly having someone who understands attention and what we could do. She was mentioning the yoga. When he was young, we did animal yoga, which was a video-based yoga designed specifically for kids as one of the things to help build those skills and you know, help them with body movement and everything that's all tied together.
Jeff, I know you're expanding into the UK at the moment as well. So it just confirms that struggling with attention, and especially now after COVID globally, that it's as if parents are now more aware of the problems, where in the past it could have been the school's problem or the teacher's problem because you don't see your child the whole day. It doesn't seem that bad maybe in the time you do spend with them. But I think I maybe just want to confirm, sometimes we think it's maybe just our environment, our country, our circumstances, our lack of knowledge about it maybe. Is it really a global thing? You now work with companies all over the world. Tell us.
It is absolutely a global thing. We are expanding to the UK because it's in, you know, our games are in English right now. But we're also working with expanding to South Korea because they see the attentions and they're very big video game players there. And, you know, it's a very broadly recognized problem. You know, talking with a principal here in the US, he said at least, you know, while only maybe 10 to 12% of his students are diagnosed with something that's specific around attention, he would say a quarter of his students have attention challenges that get in the way of them doing well academically. And that's not, you know, not an unusual situation. And, you know, attention challenges can come from a lot of different things, including stressful childhood, you know, and speaking with some of the folks, we have a school here in San Diego where they serve homeless children specifically. And they said that every one of their children have attention challenges because they've been through such a stressful experience in their young lives. And so, you know, it's a problem everywhere and certainly not, you know, limited to any specific country.
Jeff, will you tie what you offer at BrainLeap in with the research that we've just heard had taken place? So tell us more about BrainLeap.
Sure. So BrainLeap was started because the original research that Leanne was talking about looked so promising. It was a small study. There were 23 kids who completed the study. A few always drop out. But 100% of them showed improvements in attention, at least on some of the measure, you know, at least one of the measures that we were, that the study was measuring. And so that made it pretty clear that, you know, kids are going to benefit from it. And since then, we've worked with an independent researcher at the University of Florida who did it in an after-school program, specifically with children who have reading challenges. And they all saw improvements in attention too. We measure different aspects of attention. Currently, we have 5 different measures of attention. And so, you know, some kids are going to be weaker in some areas and some stronger in others. But, you know, we see improvements along at least a couple of those measures for every kid who actually completes the training.
tell us about the workings of your game. What makes it different, and what makes it exciting? Why does kids love doing it?
So we call it the Attention Arcade because the games are fairly simple games to understand, much like you get in an arcade. One of the first game that was built is called Dr. Mole and Mr. Hyde. It's actually like a whack-a-mole game where you want to hit the moles that pop up. But rather than using your hands or a keyboard to control it, you're using only your eyes. So you're looking at the moles that pop up. As Leanne mentioned, then we're also training inhibitory control there. So you get a little warning, and when Dr. Mole pops up, you are not supposed to look at him. And so this is very difficult for most children when they get started. It's difficult for a lot of adults. I've had many teachers tell me, this is hard. Should I be training too? I'm like, very possibly. And so you want to not look at something that is the most obvious thing on the screen that pops up. So you need to be paying attention to it in your peripheral vision, that covert attention that Leanne was talking about, but know that you're not supposed to be looking at it. And then the games get more challenging as you move forward. One of the things we've added in fairly recently is that at some point in the Dr. Mole game, 2 moles pop up, one of whom you're to look at and one of which you shouldn't look at, which becomes challenging. But as kids get better at this, they want an increasing challenge. Then they start dropping from the sky on parachutes and stuff. So we're trying to create a fun way for them to play and build those skills. So in Shroom Digger, you have to look at the mushrooms to get them to shrink and disappear. You have to look at them for 3 to 4 seconds, which doesn't sound very long, but to actually hold your gaze on something for that amount of time takes a while. And then you have to find them in a fairly busy background and a mystical landscape. And so, you're holding and practicing holding that gaze but it's in a fun way. And the great thing about it playing a game is kids don't feel bad when they lose.
Yes.
When they want to just keep going. They want to try it again. We had a great experience at one of the schools we're working with they had a kid come over and he was playing Dr. Mole, and he was 7, and he was trying not to look at this Dr. Mole popping up, and he knew he shouldn't. So he's covering his eyes, his head, everything, but he's laughing while he's doing it instead of feeling bad about himself. And so, that's really the power of making this into a game where kids can do something that's hard, but they can build towards mastery, which is what video games do particularly well. Ours just happen to build a skill that you want your child to have, versus mastery of many other games that don't help.
Do you measure results through these games? So could you tell if there's active improvement?
Absolutely. So the game suite has 7 games, but it also has 5 assessments. So the assessments are separate from the games, and they are triggered at various times. You get baseline measurements, so when you're first starting, and then you do an assessment every 2 hours. And we interleave them so that kids don't get bored. The assessments aren't nearly as fun as the games, but they are games, and they are a fun way for a child to measure attentional vigilance, being able to stay on a task for a period of time, even when it's not particularly exciting for them. We're measuring those eye movements, moving your eyes and your attention to something that appears suddenly and being accurate about that. We're measuring inhibitory control, being able to look away from the thing that you most want to look at. And they're fun games. For an assessment. The kids do want to get back to the games, but they know they have to complete the assessment so that they can get back. And it's really important to measure that progress and see it over time so that the skills they're learning in the games transfer outside of those specific games, because every kid gets better at a video game if they play it, or nearly everyone. But they're building those skills that should transfer outside of the games into real life.
Jeff, but it also sounds like just on a physical level also, the development and exercise that you get from the eye muscles moving around on screen, if you're doing everything on screen, is amazing. But also what I want to ask you is, if you busy doing these exercises, you mentioned attention and focus and the gaze and inhibitory control. What other areas of the brain are also engaged doing these games?
You should have asked that when Leanne was here.
Well, yeah, because I just listened. This sounds so rounded. It sounds like there's a lot of cognitive skills that would be involved in just doing the exercises, and I get excited about that.
Well, you know, so what I get excited about is the results that we hear from users. And so, you know, what does it mean to have better attention? Well, you know, it's how you apply it. So, for example, one of the stories I love telling is 8-year-old Jack liked to read the encyclopedia. Clearly a bright boy who loved information, but he read the encyclopedia because it was hard to read more than a paragraph or so of information at a time. He couldn't focus for long enough. After training with the games for about 3 months, he read the whole Harry Potter series in one summer. Sure. He read, you know, about 1,700 pages, and he is a voracious reader. I check in with his dad every once in a while to just see how things are going. His math he's able to do more math because he can focus long enough to, you know, get the concept. If your attention's all over the place, even if you're capable of doing that math, you can't, because it takes too much of that capacity to stay focused. This is another analogy I love talking about, is when you have poor attention skills, it's like driving a Humvee, one of those huge vehicles that require a ton of gas to get where you want to go. You have to fill up the tank more often, you're burning a lot of energy, and this is what a kid who has attention challenges is really doing. They're using a ton of their energy just to get that focus. But if you can build those skills, if you have good attention skills, you run a lot more like a Prius. That very efficient, doesn't take much gas. You now can put your energy into what you're doing instead of putting it into into just trying to focus. And so, you know, it becomes easy to read. The company that we're actually working with in the UK does a reading assessment using eye movements as part of it. And when you see a kid's eye movements who has a reading challenge versus one who can do it smoothly, it's a lot about attention. They're just an efficient reader is very smooth in their movements, and they don't stick on words for long. I mean, you see some of these kids and they're all over the page when they're reading, and that's inefficient. It's, you know, they're working hard to get their attention focused there, and so they're missing a lot of the content. And that's the thing I get excited about, is when kids can do things they couldn't do before, or do it easily, and you know, they're really going to benefit from that.
Absolutely, Jeff, and they don't give up as easy. Because I think that for me is something that's really sad. If it's such hard work to do something, who would want to do it? You'd rather just give up.
Well, and we've even heard from some parents, their children are actually in better moods most of the time when they have better attention skills, because they're not having to use so much energy just to do what they're required to do in school and maybe chores at home and everything, that they have more capacity. You know, they're being nicer to their siblings, which just sounds unrelated to attention, but it's because they're not mentally exhausted. Because as Leanne said, it's a limited resource, although you can train it so that you have a lot more capacity there.
Jeff, what I do want to ask though is, and I'm sure a lot of parents would wonder about this, if I've now improved attention skills, would that stick? Is it something that then stays like that, or is it something that would just disappear again?
Right. So, you know, we wish we had done more of the research with a longitudinal study and had a lot more kids in it. But from what getting feedback from parents, anecdotal evidence, in about 3 months, you're going to start seeing improvements in things like schoolwork. To maintain that, you need to continue with a bit of maintenance schedule on that. You want to continue on for a few more months, still playing, just because you want to solidify those skills. But the great thing is, once you've really built them and solidified them, they stick. That's what I was mentioning. I check in with Jack's dad. He was one of our very early pilot users. It's been a year and a half since he's done any attention training, and he is still thriving. So it's not something where you'll see a backslide early on if you train and then stop. But as long as you get that foundational skill and build that muscle, now you're using it every day. So you're going to continue
every single day.
Strong. Yeah.
All right. So we've officially run out of time, Jeff, but I do have one question. Someone had asked, they've got a child that their eyes train very easily. How long are these sessions that kids need to do when they do the Brain Leap games?
We recommend 20 to 30 minutes per session, although for some children, that can be a bit much. You can break it into multiple sessions, maybe 10 to 15 minute sessions, and still see a benefit. The other thing we recommend is when you're first getting started, the children only do about 10 minutes the first few times, because their eyes will get tired, most children. So you want to work them into it. But once they get used to it and build those muscles that they're learning to control, they'll find a 30-minute session is fun, but still a little tiring, and that's fine. We don't have problems with kids playing for hours because they get tired, and that's a good thing. They hopefully will go outside and do something else rather than sitting in front of the computer. So,
Jeff, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and we'd
Sure,
like to
thanks
wish
for having
you
me.
all the best of luck with your million that you're going to achieve this year, and we're sure it's going to be 2, 3, 4, and 5 million. This is something that exists everywhere in the world.
Yes.
And people should be aware that it's through training you could better focus and attention, and that's to the benefit not only the individual, but it becomes the community, the teachers, the parents, and everybody around them.
Absolutely, and the long-term prospects for a child who has much better attention skills. There was a study done in the US of a child at 4 years old, their attention skills determined whether they would graduate from college by 25. That was a strong indicator. That was before they knew they could train it. So this was an older study, but that says a lot, much more than their academic abilities. So
Jeff, just the last thing is Brain Leap available in South Africa?
it is through Brain Ability. So they have it in their training centers.
Brain Ability and OptiCards, and they're available right throughout the country, and also now available in the UAE. I did see we had a few UAE listeners tonight. So yeah, you could go and check that out. Jeff, thank you very much again. And we do hope we're going to see you in the future as well.
Sure.
And we'd like to explore this further and maybe have a session where we actually look at the activities and you could take us through the activities and explain a little bit more.
Yeah, that'd
Be glad to.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Jeff, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody that joined us this evening. We do appreciate it, and we would love to keep sharing information with you. So please, in the chat box, you have our email as well. If you have any suggestions, please send them through to us so we can keep doing the work we do and make that information available to you. Jeff, I wish you all the success in the world. Go change those lives and make things better for everybody. We are 100% behind that vision. I love your vision.
Thank you.
Our takeout for tonight is attention and focus can be trained. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, in other words, there's hope. There's always hope.
And we're getting all these thank yous, and thank yous. So Jeff, yeah, there's lots of people that buy into this process. So we'll see you next week again.
Okay. Let me know.
You have a lovely day. Thank you to everyone for joining, and we are now going to sign off. We've seen all the questions, and we'll respond to those throughout the next week.
We'll also communicate with Dr. Leanne and with Jeff on those questions. And then if it takes a day or two to get back to you, please excuse us and just be patient with us. But we'll make sure we answer all your questions.
And recordings will be made available in South Africa, the US, and the UAE. So that would be available for people to go and listen to. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.